You handed Alex the company, I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound composed. Even as I forced myself to stand tall before him, my father remained unmoved, his imposing presence behind the massive oak desk as steady as ever. He didn't bother to look up from his papers, just kept flipping through them with practiced indifference. He's the son, Sophia. It's his role to take over. The words echoed like a verdict, heavy and unyielding. The room seemed to shrink around me, the walls pressing in until I had to grip the back of the chair in front of me to stay upright. His role, I repeated louder, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. Papa, I've spent years proving myself. I know this business inside and out. Alex, he doesn't even want this. He doesn't care like I do. Sophia, my father replied, his tone calm but final, each syllable driving home the futility of resistance. This isn't about caring. It's about tradition. And tradition says the son takes over. That's how it's always been. My name is Sophia Ramirez. I'm 28 years old, and for most of my life, my father has been the sun around which I orbited. His approval was the currency of my childhood. His praise rare and precious. He demanded excellence but offered fairness. At least as long as you played by his rules, stayed within the boundaries he drew with invisible ink. I watched him build our import-export business from nothing, every sacrifice and sleepless night etched into his lined face. I grew up learning that hard work was everything and that loyalty to family was non-negotiable. By 15, I'd already decided that I didn't just want to be part of the company. I wanted to lead it, to stand where my father stood and steer the legacy he'd created. So I set out to prove myself, determined to earn what I wanted. I graduated at the top of my class, earned a finance degree, and spent every summer shadowing my father through bustling warehouses, tense boardrooms, and endless paperwork. I took internships, learned how to negotiate contracts and manage supply chains, and started suggesting improvements that made a real difference. My father would sometimes nod, even smile. You're sharp, Sophia. You'd make an excellent CFO someday. CFO. The title was always just out of reach, dangled like a reward and a limit all at once. It stung every time he said it. It sounded like praise, but really it was a wall, a reminder that my ambition had boundaries, that I could go far but never all the way. The title of CEO was never spoken, never considered for me. That was reserved for Alex, as if it were his birthright. Alex, my younger brother, was everything I wasn't, easygoing, charming, effortlessly likable. Where I was meticulous and driven, Alex was content to coast. He drifted through school with average grades, more interested in soccer games and parties than in any ambition. When he finally entered the company, it was only because he had run out of other options. He treated it like a safety net, not a calling. He'd show up late, leave early, and spend half his time on his phone or joking with friends in the break room. Yet my father adored him. He just needs time, Sophia. He'll grow into his role, he'd say when I brought up Alex's lack of commitment. He's still figuring things out. It was infuriating, but I clung to hope that my work would speak louder than tradition, that someday my father would truly see me. But standing in his office, hearing him dismiss my years of effort with a single gesture, I realized just how deeply the roots of tradition ran. I'd been naive, believing merit would matter more than legacy. The truth was, I'd been running a race whose finish line was never meant for me. Word of Alex's promotion spread fast, like a storm that nobody wanted to talk about but everyone felt. My coworkers, people I'd shared late nights and tough deadlines with, offered awkward smiles and quiet condolences. Even those who liked Alex couldn't hide their unease. It was obvious to everyone that he wasn't ready for this role, and the company felt it too, like a ship suddenly off course. I tried to throw myself into my projects, but frustration kept gnawing at me. Every time Alex skipped a meeting or fumbled a decision, it was a fresh wound. He didn't seem to notice the impact of his actions, didn't care if the company thrived or faltered. He coasted along, secure in the knowledge that the job was his by default, not by achievement. The tension finally broke one afternoon as I walked past the conference room and heard voices raised in frustration. Alex and one of our most respected senior managers. "Alex, this shipment delay is going to cost us thousands," the manager pleaded, his patience worn thin. "We need to address this now." "I'm working on it," Alex replied, slouched in his chair, defensive but detached. "It's not that big of a deal." "Not that big of a deal," the manager shot back, incredulous. "Do you even understand the implications? We stand to lose a major client if we don't fix this immediately." I paused outside the door, heart pounding. Alex wouldn't meet the manager's eyes, wouldn't take responsibility. In that moment I saw just how much was at stake. This wasn't just about tradition or family politics anymore. Alex's inexperience, and worse, his indifference, was putting everything my father had built at risk. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by spreadsheets and reports, trying to piece together just how bad things had gotten. Every file I opened revealed more problems. Delayed shipments, lost contracts, mistakes that could have been avoided. It was like watching a slow-motion disaster, one that no one else seemed willing to acknowledge. Alex was steering the company toward a cliff, and my father, blinded by tradition and hope, refused to see it. I closed my laptop and leaned back, exhaustion settling deep in my bones. The thought of confronting my father again filled me with dread, but I knew I couldn't just sit by and watch this happen. This was bigger than my pride or my disappointment. It was about the hundreds of people who relied on us, about the legacy my father had built from nothing, about the future of everything we'd worked for. I took a shaky breath and reached for my phone, dialing the one person I trusted to give me unvarnished advice. Elena, my old professor and mentor. She had always encouraged me to fight for what mattered, even when the odds seemed impossible. When she answered, I didn't bother with pleasantries. "I need your advice," I said, voice raw. "I think I'm about to start a fight I can't win." "Good," Elena replied, her voice steady and warm. "That means it's finally a fight worth having." In that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. My father's world was built on tradition, on unspoken rules and rigid expectations. But tradition, left unchallenged, could choke the very thing it was meant to preserve. If I wanted to save my family's legacy, I would have to become the challenger, to fight for a new vision of what was possible, even if it meant going to war with the person I'd spent my whole life trying to please. For the first time I felt a spark of something fierce inside me, a willingness to risk everything, not just for myself but for the business, for its people, and maybe even for my father, who didn't yet realize just how much he stood to lose. It didn't take long for the problems to show up after Alex took over. At first, they were just small hiccups. An order shipped out a day late, a minor miscommunication with a supplier, but soon the cracks widened. Shipments got delayed. Deadlines slipped by unnoticed. The company's perfect reputation, something my father had spent his whole life building, suddenly felt fragile. People in the industry were starting to whisper, their voices carrying further than I would have liked. I'd overheard 2 account managers in the hallway, their words hushed but urgent. "Did you hear about the Valencia order? It's not like them to mess up." Even some of our most loyal clients, people I'd known since childhood, were quietly reaching out to competitors, their confidence shaken by the mounting mistakes. My father, always the optimist when it came to Alex, kept making excuses. "He's learning, Sophia," he told me one night at dinner, waving away my concerns as if they were nothing more than specks of dust. "These things take time. You can't expect perfection right away." His fork hovered in midair, his expression stubbornly hopeful, as if sheer will could fix what was unraveling. "How much time, Papa?" I snapped back before I could stop myself, my voice sharper than I intended. The frustration I'd been bottling up for weeks poured out of me. "Do you even realize how many accounts we've lost this month? Or how close we are to losing one of our biggest clients? This isn't just a rough patch. We're bleeding, and you're acting like it's a paper cut." Alex, sitting across from me, let out an exaggerated sigh and rolled his eyes. "Relax, Sophia. I've got it under control," he said, his tone dismissive. He reminded me of a boy pretending to be a man, more interested in maintaining his facade than actually confronting the problems piling up around him. My hands clenched around my fork so tightly my knuckles turned white. Under control. Like the shipment to Valencia last week. Or the contract renewal you forgot to send. Do you even know how many people had to scramble to clean up your mess? Okay, my father cut in. His voice sharper than I'd heard in months. That's enough. We're not going to fix this over dinner. There was an edge to his words, a note of finality that demanded silence. But it didn't make the tension at the table dissipate. If anything, it thickened, settling over us like a heavy fog. My father's stubbornness was worse than the silence. He just wouldn't listen, not yet. Not to me. That night, after everyone had retreated to their corners of the house, I called Elena. She answered on the second ring, her no-nonsense tone cutting through the anxiety that had built up inside me. "How bad is it?" she asked, not bothering with small talk. "Worse than I thought," I admitted, pacing back and forth in my living room, the city lights flickering outside my window. Alex is completely in over his head, and my father refuses to see it. He's too hung up on tradition, on the idea that Alex is the natural successor, to notice that the business is falling apart. I feel like I'm screaming into a void. Elena's sigh crackled over the phone. "And what are you going to do about it?" Her question came quick and sharp, forcing me to stop in my tracks. I hesitated, my throat tight with uncertainty. "I don't know. My father's made it clear he doesn't think I belong in charge. Even if I confront him, he'll just brush me off again. I'm not sure what else to do." "Look, Sophia," Elena said, her tone softening just a little. "You're the most capable person I know. You've spent years getting ready for this. Every late night, every client dinner, every crisis you've smoothed over. You really going to let a little stubbornness stop you now?" "It's not a little," I muttered, sinking onto the couch. "It's decades of it. He's built his identity on this company and on the idea that Alex would take over. To him, I'm still just his daughter, not a leader." There was a pause, then Elena said, "So prove him wrong. Don't wait for him to hand you the reins. Show him you're the one who should be running the company. People are depending on you, Sophia. Not just your family, the whole staff, the clients, everyone." Her words echoed in my mind long after we hung up. Prove him wrong. It sounded so simple, almost easy, but the reality was daunting. The thought of standing up to my father, of challenging everything he believed about family, about legacy, about me, felt like trying to scale a mountain in the dark, each step uncertain and dangerous. The days that followed were a blur of worry and restless energy. I poured myself into work, trying to hold the pieces together while Alex's mistakes grew harder to conceal. A week later, things finally hit a breaking point. I was in my office late one afternoon, finishing up a report that should have been Alex's responsibility, when Carlos, one of the sales managers, knocked on my door. "Sophia," he said, stepping in and glancing over his shoulder as if to make sure no one was listening. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" "Of course. Come in." "What's going on?" "It's Alex," he said, lowering his voice. "He's struggling. He missed another client meeting this morning, an important one, and when I tried to follow up, he just shrugged it off. But this client, Sophia, they're one of our biggest accounts. If we lose them, it'll hurt bad." I shut my laptop and leaned in, the gravity of the situation settling over me. "Does Papa know?" Carlos looked uneasy, shifting from foot to foot. "I tried bringing it up last week, but he brushed me off. Said Alex just needed more time, that he'd get the hang of it. But things are getting worse, not better. The team's worried." "I'm worried." A long sigh escaped me, the weight of everything pressing down harder than ever. "Thank you for telling me, Carlos. I'll take care of it." He nodded, relief flickering in his eyes, and slipped out the door. After he left, I just sat there, staring at the stack of reports on my desk. The truth was impossible to ignore. I couldn't keep watching the company fall apart, not when I knew I could help. If my father wouldn't listen, I'd have to make him. I owed it to everyone who depended on us. So I dove in, Over the next few days, I dissected every detail. Financial reports, client feedback, operational processes. I talked to department heads, listened to their frustrations, and gathered data. I built a plan, not just a list of Alex's shortcomings, but a vision for the future. I wanted to offer solutions, not just complaints. I mapped out new systems for client communication, retraining for staff, and strategies for regaining lost trust. I even outlined ways Alex could find a role where he could succeed without putting the company at risk. Elena looked over my plan during one of our late-night calls, her sharp eyes catching every detail. "This is solid, Sophia," she said, sounding genuinely impressed. "You've covered every angle. Operations, finance, morale. You're not just reacting, you're thinking ahead." "Thanks," I said, though my nerves were still a tangled mess. "But will it be enough? You know how my father is. He's never been good at admitting he's wrong." Elena didn't hesitate. "Forget what he'll say for a moment. This isn't about him and his pride. It's about the company, the people who rely on it, and the future you want to build. Go in there and own it. Show them what real leadership looks like." With my plan finished, I called for a family meeting. If I was going to do this, I needed Alex there too. He had to hear it, to see the consequences of his actions, just as much as my father did. I wanted to give them both a chance to respond, but I also knew I couldn't back down. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. My mind spun with worst-case scenarios. My father shutting me down, Alex lashing out, the plan falling apart before it even began. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every mistake, every moment I'd been told to wait my turn. But deep down I knew I was out of time. If I didn't act now, there might not be a company left to save. The next evening I walked into the dining room, heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. My father and Alex were already there, both watching me with that familiar mix of impatience and curiosity. The table was set, but the room was thick with unspoken tension. I took a breath, gripping the folder in my hands like a lifeline. "Thank you for coming," I began, my voice steady even though my nerves were on fire. "I need to talk to you both about the company. And I need you to listen, not just as family, but as the people responsible for its future." That dining room didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a battlefield, every chair a strategic position, every word a potential weapon. My father sat at the head of the table, all stone-faced authority. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. Alex slouched in his chair, scrolling through his phone, projecting indifference, but I could see the tension in his jaw. As I opened my folder and began to lay out my plan, I realized that this was more than just a business meeting. It was the culmination of years of waiting, watching, and preparing. I was no longer willing to let tradition, stubbornness, or fear decide the company's fate. For the first time, I truly believed in my right to lead, and I was ready to fight for it. My father shot Alex a sharp look, his eyes cold and assessing, and I stood at the far end of the table, clutching my folder of documents. My plan, my hands damp with sweat, my heart thudding in my chest. The room was thick with tension, the kind that settles over a family when everything familiar is about to shift. I felt a strange mix of fear and resolve, as if I were teetering on the edge of something enormous. "Well, Sophia," my father finally said, his voice breaking the silence like a stone thrown in still water. "You called this meeting. Let's hear it." I inhaled slowly, grounding myself, and opened my folder with careful hands. "I've been reviewing the company's performance over the past few months," I began, my voice steady. "And the truth is, we're heading straight for a crisis. Shipments are delayed, clients are dropping us, and our reputation is taking a real hit. If we don't act now, we could lose everything you've worked for." His brow furrowed, lines of worry deepening, but he didn't interrupt. Alex, on the other hand, scoffed, a short, dismissive laugh snaking out of him. "Come on, Sophia, it's not that bad. You're exaggerating. You always do." I turned to face him, refusing to shrink away. "Alex, we've lost 3 major clients in the last month. One of them had been with us for more than 10 years. Does that sound like nothing to you? His smirk faded, and for a moment he looked away, unable to meet my gaze. The room was silent, the only sound the shuffling of papers as I pulled out a report and slid it across the table to my father, pointing to the highlighted numbers. This shows the financial impact of those losses, I said, making sure my voice didn't tremble. And this, I brought out another document, is direct feedback from the clients who left. They all say the same thing: poor communication, missed deadlines, and no real leadership from us. My father's face grew darker as he flipped through the reports. His jaw clenched tight. "Why haven't I seen these before?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "Because no one wants to upset you," I replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Everyone's afraid to tell you the truth, Papa. But I'm not." He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, as if bracing himself. "And what's this truth, Sophia?" I didn't hesitate. "That Alex isn't ready for this role," I said, each word ringing out in the silent room. "If we keep pretending he is, we'll lose the business." Alex shot up, face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous. You've always been jealous because I'm the one in charge and you're not. Just admit it, Sophia." "Jealous?" I could hear my own frustration rising. "Do you really think I want to run this company for my ego? This isn't about me, Alex. It's about the hundreds of employees who rely on us. It's about safeguarding what Papa spent his whole life building. If you can't see that, then you're not just unready, you're blind." Alex's hands curled into fists at his sides, but he didn't respond. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, reduced by the weight of his own mistakes. My father watched us both, his face unreadable, the silence stretching out until I wondered if I'd gone too far. But I knew if I backed down now, nothing would change. "I'm not saying this to hurt you, Alex," I said, softening my tone. "But you know as well as I do you're not ready. That's not something to be ashamed of. We all have things to learn. But if we don't act now, we may not have a business left to save." I turned back to my father and slid the folder closer to him. "This is my plan. It focuses on the biggest issues: restoring communication with our clients, streamlining our operations, and rebuilding the trust we've lost. I've outlined the steps we need to take and how we can start immediately. I know it's a lot, but it's necessary." He opened the folder, flipping through the pages slowly. I watched his eyes move over my notes and charts, his jaw working with the effort of holding back his thoughts. When he finally looked up, he seemed tired, but there was a new sharpness to his gaze, as if he was seeing me, really seeing me, for the first time. "This is a good plan," he said, his voice heavy with meaning. "But leadership isn't just about plans, Sophia. It's about responsibility. It's about being willing to bear the weight of every decision, every mistake." I nodded, feeling years of effort and longing boil up inside me. "I've been responsible my whole life, Papa. You know that. You know the sacrifices I've made, how hard I've worked for this company, even when no one was watching. I care about this business as much as you do. All I'm asking for is a chance to prove it." The air in the room felt thick, charged with the unspoken history between us, the years of being told I was too young, too emotional, too much like my mother. My father stared at me, weighed down by decades of tradition, by the pressure of living up to his own father's expectations. For a moment, I saw the struggle in his eyes, the war between pride and fear. After what felt like an eternity, he turned to Alex. "What do you think?" Alex looked stunned, as if the question itself was a betrayal. "What do I think? You're actually considering this?" "I am," my father replied, his voice quiet but firm. "Because Sophia's right. We can't survive if we keep doing what we're doing." Alex opened his mouth to argue, then shut it again. His shoulders slumped and he let out a long, defeated breath. "Fine," he muttered, barely audible. "Let her do it." My father turned back to me, his expression grave. "You'll have your chance, Sophia. But it won't be easy. You'll have to prove yourself every step of the way, Not just to me, but to everyone who's doubted you. My heart pounded so hard it almost hurt. I understand, Papa. I won't let you down. That night, as I left the dining room, I felt a storm of emotions. Relief at finally being heard, pride in standing my ground, and a creeping sense of dread about all that lay ahead. I'd won this battle, but I knew the war was just beginning. The real challenge would be carving out my place in a world that had never imagined a woman at the helm. The next few weeks blurred together in a whirlwind of early mornings and late nights. Taking on the mantle of leadership was nothing like I'd imagined. I was constantly tested, not just by the problems Alex had left behind, but by the skepticism of people who'd never seen me as anything more than the boss's daughter. My first move was to meet with every department head, one by one, to get a sense of what they were facing. At first, they were wary, their words careful, as if waiting for me to slip up. But I listened, and more importantly, I acted on what they told me. When I implemented real solutions and followed up on my promises, things started to shift. Slowly, trust began to return, and people started to believe in the possibility of change. At home, though, things were far more complicated. My father was a whirlwind of pride and anxiety, sometimes praising my work, other times questioning my decisions. He was a man caught between two worlds, the one he'd grown up in, where leadership passed from father to son, and this new, uncertain world where his daughter was proving herself day after day. He wanted to believe in me, but every step forward seemed to challenge the traditions that had shaped his whole life. I saw the struggle in him, the pride he tried to hide, and the fear that maybe, just maybe, the world was changing faster than he could keep up. There were moments when I caught him watching me, a soft light in his eyes, as if he was seeing not just the daughter he'd raised, but the leader I was becoming. Still, I knew this was only the beginning. Every decision, every risk, every mistake would be scrutinized. I would have to work twice as hard, be twice as careful, prove myself again and again, not just for myself, but for all the women who would come after me. And as I lay awake at night, exhausted but unbroken, I promised myself that I would not waste this chance. I owed it to my father, to our employees, and most of all to myself. One night, long after the house had gone quiet, I wandered past my father's study and found him sitting at his desk, the lamplight flickering over the edges of an old family photo he held in his hands. He didn't even glance up as I entered. His eyes were fixed on the faces in the picture, lost somewhere between memory and regret. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost reverent. "You've done well, Sophia." The words startled me. For so long I'd wanted to hear something like that from him, and now that he'd said it, I didn't know how to respond. I murmured, "Thank you, Papa," barely above a whisper, unsure if he caught it. He set the photo back on the desk, and when he finally looked at me, his gaze was softer than I remembered. "I should have seen it sooner. You're more than capable. I've always known that, deep down. But it's hard, to change the way you've seen the world your whole life." His words carried a heaviness, the weight of decades spent clinging to old traditions and expectations, of believing that leadership belonged to someone else, someone like Alex, not me. I nodded, feeling the gravity of the moment settling between us. For once, I didn't feel the need to argue or prove myself. "It's not just about you changing, Papa. It's about what's best for the company, and for us as a family." He offered me a small, reluctant smile, one that seemed to hold both apology and acceptance. "I see that now," he said quietly. But Alex, my brother, struggled in ways I hadn't anticipated. In the days following my transition into the leadership role, he became a ghost in the office, slipping in late, avoiding meetings, finding reasons to disappear into empty corners. When I finally managed to catch him alone in the break room, he stood there, his back to me, fussing with his coffee cup as if it held all the answers he couldn't find in himself. "You don't have to hide, Alex," I told him, making an effort to keep my voice gentle, to remind him this wasn't about blame. "This isn't about you failing. It's about putting the company first." He wouldn't look at me at first, but after a long, shaky sigh, he leaned back against the counter, finally letting some of his armor fall away. I feel like I let everyone down. Especially Dad, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. There was so much pain there. Years of living up to expectations that never quite fit. You didn't let anyone down, I said, hoping he could sense the sincerity in my words. You were put in a spot you weren't ready for. That's not your fault. For the first time in a long while, he met my eyes, something vulnerable shining through his usual bravado. You really mean that? Of course I do, I replied. You have so many strengths, Alex. Leadership just isn't one of them, and that's okay. You're still valuable, maybe even more so, now that you can focus on what you're good at. The relief in his posture was almost palpable. For the first time in ages, we had a real conversation. About the weight he'd been carrying, about the pressure to live up to our father's image, about the mistakes that haunted him. By the end of it, I could see the burden had eased, even if he'd never say it out loud. The weeks that followed were a trial by fire. Every day brought new challenges. Staff uncertain about the changes, clients wary after past missteps, old systems breaking down just when I needed them to work. But slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, things began to shift. We won back 2 major clients who'd walked away years ago, each victory a testament to our renewed purpose. I worked with a team to put new systems in place, not just to prevent old mistakes, but to create a culture of accountability and innovation. For the first time, people brought me their ideas, not just their problems. There was a sense of momentum, a feeling that we were building something stronger than what we'd had before. Dad began to step back, trusting me to make decisions. He stopped attending every meeting, stopped second-guessing every plan I laid out. Even Alex found his stride, embracing a marketing role where his creativity and instinct for trends brought new energy to the company's campaigns. Without the pressure of leadership, he flourished, pitching bold new ideas in meetings and earning genuine respect from the team. For the first time, I saw him happy in his work, and it brought a kind of peace to both of us. Most nights, I found myself alone in my office, the city lights twinkling through the window as I reviewed the day's work. I was often exhausted, but it was a good kind of tired, the kind that comes from knowing you've built something real. The company, once teetering on the edge, was steady again. Clients were returning, the team was motivated, and I began to believe not just that I could handle this, but that I truly belonged in this role. Every small win, every positive client email, every solved crisis, became a quiet affirmation that I was making a difference. The self-doubt that had shadowed me for so long began to fade. I realized I no longer woke up dreading the day ahead, no longer felt the need to justify my decisions or apologize for my ambition. Instead, I felt grounded, secure in the knowledge that I had earned my place, not just through family connections, but through hard work, resilience, and vision. Even my relationship with Dad evolved. He no longer hovered or questioned my every move. Instead, he became a resource, a mentor who offered advice when asked, but trusted my judgment otherwise. One afternoon, he stopped by my office, a rare interruption these days. I was looking through the old client records, he said, standing in the doorway. You brought back a client we lost 5 years ago. I couldn't do that, but you did. There was genuine admiration in his eyes. I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me, the kind that only comes from finally being seen for who you are. Thanks, Papa. It wasn't easy, but I knew it mattered. He nodded, his expression softer than I'd seen in years. I'm proud of you, Sophia. You've done more for this company than I ever imagined. That moment meant more to me than any business win. It wasn't just about numbers or reputation. It was about finally earning his respect, something I'd spent my whole life chasing. Alex, too, was thriving. Free from the pressure of leadership, he poured his energy into marketing, bringing a fresh perspective that helped us stand out in a crowded field. He took risks, pitched innovative campaigns, and built a small but passionate team around him. We didn't always agree, but for the first time our disagreements were about the work, not about old resentments or sibling rivalry. Even at home things changed. Family dinners became lighter, the tension that once choked conversation replaced by genuine interest and laughter. Dad started asking for my opinions, actually listening instead of dismissing them. Even Mom, who had always been more of an observer, began to chime in. Her quiet support, a steady presence that I hadn't realized I'd needed. One evening, after everyone had left for the night, I walked through the empty office and paused in the conference room, looking out at the city's skyline. The world outside was alive with possibility, and I felt a deep sense of ownership, not just of the company but of my own story. This was my company now. Not because it was handed to me but because I fought for it, rebuilt it, made it stronger. 6 months ago I was frustrated, unseen, and unsure. Now I stood taller, more confident, no longer defined by my doubts or by anyone else's expectations. And I realized, as I looked out at the city lights, that this was only the beginning. There would be more obstacles, more hard decisions, more nights spent working late. But I wasn't afraid of what was to come. The company was thriving, my family was healing, and I was exactly where I was meant to be. Ready not just to face the future but to shape it. For the first time I didn't just feel qualified. I was eager to see what came next, to embrace every challenge and every triumph, knowing I had already proven to myself that I could lead, and that I could make a lasting difference. I am in recovery and finally able to live the life I have always dreamed of. It wasn't a coincidence, it was my choice. The night I turned off the lights and closed my office, I felt a deep sense of peace. This wasn't just a victory, it was my future, and I couldn't wait to see what would happen next.